just women are in danger, but all marginalized people. Where being uniquely different right now might truly be considered a crime. It seems as though we had all slipped into a false sense of comfort, that justice would prevail and that good would win in the end. Well, good did not win this election, but good will win in the end. So what today means is that we are far from the end. Today marks the beginning of our story. The revolution starts here. The fight for the right to be free, to be who we are, to be equal. Let's march together through this darkness, and with each step, know that we are not afraid. That we are not alone. That we will not back down. That there is power in our unity, and that no opposing force stands a chance in the face of true solidarity. And to our detractors that insist that this march will never add up to anything,
Boston Red here with Friday Java, a weekly magazine of political theory, polling, and commentary. It is part of the history called people that make up this fascinating journey. We are part of the Obama network. For that, we make no apologies. What we pledge to do is give you the facts on a bridge to history. What body politics is, the most up-to-date theories of political science and psephology. Stay tuned for this incredible ride. Boston Red, peace out. From WBRN Radio and on the Boston Red Network, this is Friday Jobber on the 23rd of June 2018. Today we'll look at a recent murder in Pittsburgh, or East Pittsburgh to be more precise, of Mr. Rose, a man riding in a community-styled car-sharing operation known as a jitney. In other words, that is a taxi cab that is not licensed. In many jurisdictions, Uber was not licensed, nor was Lyft, etc. So we don't need to debate that particular situation, but he was riding in it and evidently stopped by some rookie police officer that had just been sworn in 90 minutes before. And this particular officer had moved from one police station to another, a department I should say, since 2001. That would be 2011, excuse me. That would be about 7 years, and that usually shows a problematic type situation. More will come out, obviously, on that, and stay tuned. We'll get to it. We will do the item here. This is Don Blankenship. He was a candidate in the Commonwealth of Virginia for Senate. He didn't make it. Now he's going to run on the Constitutional Party as a Constitutional Party nominee. In many of these states, you do have third parties that have achieved ballot status, and they are still around. His attempt to run, and this is by, incidentally, Godfrey, wait a minute, let me make sure I get him right here. Godfrey Skelly, he's the associate editor of the Crystal Ball. Nonetheless, This Blankenship person, he had been in jail. He was a coal mine owner. His primary vote was concentrated in southern and central parts of the Mountain State, particularly the Southern District, West Virginia. Free Blankenship's best district in the GOP primary also happened to be Senator Meacham's best district in 2010-2012. Senator Contes, if you recall the history of Senator Meacham, he finished up the term of their distinguished senator from West Virginia, and then he ran on his full term in 2012. So it was his first. He was, prior to that, he was the governor of West Virginia. Thus, the state's attorney general, somebody named Morsi, is close. Between Meacham and Morsi is close, and Blankenship does indeed run in the general election. The former coal baron could affect the outcome if Blankenship runs as a Constitutional Party nominee or as a write-in, and that was done with Lisa McCoskey out in Alaska in 2010 against Gunner Joe there. And let's see, and Joe Lieberman in Connecticut in 2006. Nonetheless, West Virginia, wild and wonderful political machinations, as they call it here. In most instances, a losing party primary signals the end of a candidate, not necessarily. Blankenship wants to join a select list of candidates who lost in that primary bid in Senate races but ran in the general election. On May 8th, Blankenship finished third in the race. Blankenship won 20% of the primary vote, trailing the Attorney General Morsi. Morsi had 34.9%, and someone else named Jenkins had 29.2%. Morsi advanced to the general election, where he faced Joe Meacham, one of the more, they call, endangered Democrats. With recent polling, and we'll get to that in a minute here, Blankenship announced on the 21st of May that he would attempt to run in a general election. Various other people have attempted to run, and they mention here Tom Sindo out of Transcredo, out of Colorado, finished second in 2010 gubernatorial race as the constitutional nominee. So that party has been used before. On June 6th, Blankenship began a petition drive to qualify for the November ballot in West Virginia. It requires a very low count, which is seen by many progressives as a positive thing. Requires him to collect about 4,500 valid signatures. Now, that means he probably has to collect about 10,000 to be, anyway. That involves that particular situation. How it remains to be seen if Blankenship will qualify for the general election ballot. Like most states, West Virginia's election code has statutory elements that either are explicitly or effectively prevent candidates who lost in the primary from running as nominees of another party. And they go to Emory University here, and Michael Klang, the Emory University Law School, that 39 out of 50 states have either a sore loser law that specifically prohibits the losing primary candidate from running in a general election, or a ban on cross-filing as candidates of multiple parties. Now, in New York, they used to have a situation where a candidate would run on the Democratic ballot and the Liberal ballot. The mayor, John Lindsay, did the same thing there. And let's see, we go on here. Losing candidates running in the general, 3 states, California, Louisiana, and Washington State, operate nonpartisan primaries. It's called in California and Louisiana the jungle primary. Including his paper, California switched to a top 2 primary system. Lastly, 3 states, Connecticut, Iowa, and New York, have a no sore loser laws there. So in other words, you could run on a different party. A candidate is a former coal executive, to say the least, that went to jail for his role in the upper Big Branch mine disaster. That should be enough there to disqualify him as a candidate from going forward. In fact, the new law doesn't go into effect till June the 6th, about a month after the West Virginia primary. The legal situation is, of course, murky, but possible that Blankenship could make the general election ballot as a constitutional party nominee. So far, only 2 nonpartisan polls of the Mountain State have included Blankenship as a third-party candidate. There was one on May the 22nd. That was a Gravis poll, showed Meacham ahead of Morrissey 53-40 in a head-on-head contest, and finally the Democratic incumbent 51-39, and Blankenship at 5. There's a Mama poll also out there that Meacham's improved 46-39 when Mom included Blankenship. So it appears that Blankenship is taking away some votes from the Republican candidate. Now, this is Meacham's margin in the 2010 Senate race. That was when he was running for the expired term of Senator Byrd. Nonetheless, it was 53% in the state, and let's see, who is it? Joe Beebe, I think here, John. It had 44%, and others at 3%. His margin was 10%, and they then break it down by districts here. We won't do that. Meacham's margin in 2012, that was a full Senate. He got 60%. Very popular figure in West Virginia. Had been a former governor there. And Joe, it looks like BB here. They got it written in red. A little more difficult here. Only 36. Didn't do as well there. Blankenship's best district in the GOP primary also happens to be Meacham's best. Well, that is really neither here nor there. And they list some others, candidates who lost major party U.S. Senate primaries but ran in the general election. Joe Lieberman, they put him out. He had 48.2%. And Lisa McCoskey beat Gunnar Joe, whatever his name was, 48%. She ran out there. And some of the others are back in 1938, William Lauger and James Thompson in 1920. That was in Wisconsin. And Rufus Hutchins in Georgia in 1914. Doesn't really apply to modern times, but just some examples here. Let's see if we have anything. In 2006, remember old Christine O'Donnell. I don't know what happened to old Christine O'Donnell. Anyway, she was in Delaware, and she ran and ended up with 17.4%. And who else laid here? Rick Hubbard, nah. I was trying to find some more recent cases here. Oh, poor old Christine. I don't know what happened to her. Anyway, I guess we'll have to settle for what we have. and notes and footnotes in Montana. Rankin, Representative Jeanette Rankin, there ran for a party senate nominee. That was in 1918. Forget about that. Anyway, that doesn't even matter. Sometimes we go to historical, but historical, we go back into the 1900s. That was an apartheid situation, a little different in Montana, but it would probably have very little relationship here in this particular sense. Now, in West Virginia, Blankenship evidently does have an audience, and him in the race, it appears, at least on the surface, that it would be good for Senator Meacham. Now, this other race here was a 2010 bid. This was old Christy O'Donnell upset Mike Castle. And she finished a distant third in the GOP primary in Delaware, but attracted 4% of the general election vote. She ran as an ultra-right candidate there in Delaware. And she did have an audience at one time, but she lost the audience, and that was the end of that story. Anyway, this will do it for the people there. Let's look at the polling here while we're here. We usually do this on the week that was, but we'll do a little bit of it here. It's simply because we're looking at, there was a lot of polling out on Thursday, and this is a Fox News, the Florida governor's race. Putnam up by 15 points in Florida. And a generic ballot here from CNN has the Democrats up by 8. From USA Today, Suffolk poll, Democrats up by 6. Wrong track, right track at 40, wrong track at 49. And then on Wednesday, we had a slew of polls. The Monmouth poll has Joe Meacham up by 7. It's in West Virginia. And the Marquette poll, Marquette University, is in Wisconsin, has Tammy Baldwin up by 11. And let's see, in the Senate race here, that's Tammy Baldwin up by 9. Wait a minute here. With various candidates. Sorry about that. Baldwin against Valmer and Nicholson, two here. That explains that. And in the Arizona Senate race, hadn't had much there. This is the Republican part of it. Predictive Insights has McSally up by 14. Kintrail Ward 25, and Joe Arpaio at 14% of the vote there. The LA Times, Dianne Feinstein's up by 18. De Leon has 18%. She has 36%. And again, the Marquette, this is Wisconsin governor's race. Walker and Evans, Walker by 4. And the Wisconsin governor's race on the Democratic side, Evers by 18. Hadn't heard of Evers. And let's see what else here. These are approval ratings of DJ Trump at 43 from Quinnipiac, and USA Today at 43, 42 at Pew. So and Reuters at 44. YouGov Economist at 44. And generic ballot, Democrats up by 6 at Quinnipiac, Rasmussen by 4, by 5 at Pew, by 7 at Economist, and 6 at Reuters. And that was pretty much it on Wednesday. We just went to this as a quick segue. Now let's remember Charles Krautheimer here was a psychiatrist at one time. He wrote a lot of columns and died at 68. Intellectual provocateur, as they call him. He wrote for the Washington Post, amongst various others, a long career, Pulitzer Prize winning Post columnist, intellectual provocateur who championed a muscular foreign policy of the neocomism that helped lay the groundwork for the 2003 invasion of Iraq. He died. The cause was a cancer of the small intestine. Very unusual. He had stomach cancer and it had been in remission, and it came back. But nonetheless, he wrote on June the 8th, I believe that the pursuit of truth and the right ideas through honest debate and rigorous argument is a notable undertaking. I'm grateful to have played a small role in the conversation that helped guide the extraordinary nation's destiny. I leave this life with no regrets. So that's what he wrote. He had been paralyzed. He wrote for a lot of that Pulitzer Prizes in 1987. He wrote for Time, New Republic, The Weekly Standard, The National Interest, Foreign Policy Journal, etc. He was on various other places. By any measure, Dr. Krautheimer was a singular profile in Washington journalism and policy making circles. He graduated in 1975 from the Harvard Medical School on time despite this diving accident that left him quadriplegic, and practiced psychiatry before a restless curiosity led him to switch paths. Instead of diagnosing people, he started analyzing the body of politics. They knew they were right. The rise of the neocons, the editor of the National Interest said in an interview about Krautheimer. And if you read America Alone, that is by Stefan Harpler, you'll find Krautheimer in there. To the left, he was a boogeyman, notably on the matter of G.W. Bush's war on terror. He was all in that particular situation. And he wrote prodigiously, no doubt about that, in the time, caustically about the societal treatment of mental illness, and so forth and so on. Here, after mass shootings, Dr. Krautheimer argued Democratic leaders make totally sincere and totally knee-jerk and totally pointless calls for strict gun laws instead of addressing what he regarded as the more relevant underlying issue, the failure of families and the state to ensure effective psychiatric intervention for those that needed it. In the liberal remake of the Casbah, he wrote in the Post after the Washington Navy Yard killings, the police captain comes upon the scene of the shooting and orders his men to round up the usual weapons. The Casbah was a movie that Humphrey Bogart was in anyway. The essayist and critic John Gross called Dr. Krautheimer a skilled conversationalist and master of the crisp and compact foundation, whose great strength was his ability to seize upon the getaway quotes are exquisitely reflecting clicks in his opponent's armor. He said his politics were shaped by growing up in post-Holocaust years with Jewish parents who had escaped the Nazis. He grew up attuned to the tragic elements of history. Once he told a C-SPAN interview. temper your optimism and your idealism. It will give you a vision of the world, which I think is a more restrained and conservative, if you like. You don't expect that much of human nature, and you are prepared for the worst. He initially defined himself as a liberal cold warrior, a Democrat, that would be Wilsonian foreign policy there, who embraced, of all things, anti-communism as well as the New Deal and Great Society programs that aided the more vulnerable. His support for robust use of American military power gradually left him alienated with the Democratic Party. However, he found ideological saucer in neoconservatism, identifying with writer Irving Kristol, who's also mentioned in Sepp Hopler's book. He coined the term the Reagan Doctrine to describe overt and unashamed American support for anti-communist revolutions. That was from Nicaragua to Angola. Not a very pretty picture painted of Dr. Krautheimer. He was also a speechwriter for Walter Mondale. I don't know if it's mentioned here or not. The U.S.-led invasion, which Krautheimer billed as the outset of a three-week war, had drug on ever since, a total of 4,000 American deaths. He downplayed Abu Ghraib, the noted political scientist and author Francis Foulandre, a longtime admirer, began to accuse Krautheimer of blind Trumpism. They exchanged long and blistering and sometimes personal critiques in the pages of the National Interest. Krautheimer and to distance himself from the neocon movement. Krautheimer at times took corrosive tones towards Bush's Democratic successor. He called Barack Obama a man of first-class intellect and first-class temperament, but took jabs at his highly suspect character, citing his friendship, well, anyway, that's neither here nor there, with Bill Ayers. Dr. Krautheimer, who Bush named to his presidential council on bioethics, was never completely a partisan warrior. And let's see what else they have to say about Krautheimer. Born in Manhattan, we know that. Moved to Canada, a little different situation there. He was a chief resident in psychiatric consultation service at Mass General, an official at the Federal Human Services Department in Washington reported that he reached a settlement with a pool of builders for about $1 million. Now, I'm not sure what that was about, but he was a speechwriter for Walter Mondale, joined the staff of the New Republic in 1981. Received a National Magazine Award, all in the 80s and 84. And basically that was it. Charles Krautheimer dead at 68. Let's go to Melania Trump. And this is an interesting situation. She wore a jacket, of all things, a Zara, it's a Z-A-R-A, green jacket with a lettering on the back. I really don't care. Do you? In confirming the news, her spokesman said it's a jacket and there was no hidden message. Well, I mean, only a fool would wear a jacket like this to inspect prison camps for youth, concentration camps in Texas. First of all, a native Texan, this is the writer of the article, wonders about Texas airspace caused the First Lady to make such a poor fashion judgment. Some of us still haven't gotten over her decision to wear stilettos to visit devastated areas devastated by Hurricane Harvey. One of the more visible women in the world with perhaps nearly unlimited access to clothes and to choose a jacket of that nature was telling, and it was deliberate, no doubt about that. But this Zara jacket, these people have been known for child labor exploitation in South America. The company was forced to apologize, pay fines for immigrant workers in Brazil, claiming they were forced to work 12-hour shifts every day for between $150 to about $190 a month. It's fitting that Trump would wear a jacket from a brand that apologized for mistreating immigrant children. So that is Melania Trump, and this is by Karen Ateni. Wait a minute here. A tenor. Anyway, that put Melania Trump where she was. I don't think we'll. Let's go to the protests in Philadelphia outside of the police closure of Interstate 376 outside of Pittsburgh. Get it right in a minute here. For the second consecutive night, several hundred people converged to protest the East Pittsburgh shooting of N1 Rose II. Hundreds of protesters marched on Interstate 376 and closed it in both directions for about 5 hours. And they didn't until about 3:30 a.m. when the roadway was cleared. Peacefully, police just arrested one person. And this is a local story here from the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette. I almost said the Pittsburgh Courier. We'll try to get that tomorrow night. Small number of motorcycle car. Anyway, that's just... No, this is just on a traffic situation there in Pittsburgh. And we'll see if we get a little bit of sound here. I don't know if we will or not.
Who did this? Police did it! Who did this? The police did it! 17! How old was this? 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 17! Say his name!
This is Mr. Rose. This was posted by Andrew Goldstein. Anyway, some various people, Mr. Goldstein evidently posted various things here. Let's go to the Gazette. And there was a Washington Post article also identified here as an unarmed teen. The officers was a 30-year-old Roosevelt, and he had not been interviewed by the Allegheny County prosecutors. This N1 Rose Jr. was shot 3 times as he ran from the officer following a traffic stop on Grandview Avenue and Howard Street. That was at about 8:40 Tuesday in East Pittsburgh. N1 was a passenger in a car that had stopped following a shooting about 13 minutes earlier. In that shooting, a 22-year-old man was shot and wounded. The car fled. The police said it was similar and showing a gunshot damage that was later stopped by this Roosevelt. I've already addressed these matters publicly, and I'm going into great detail to release the facts. That is from the Allegheny District Attorney Stephen Zappler Jr. Anyway, Zappler confirmed that N1 was not armed at the time that he was shot. He didn't say, however, N1 had the empty clip of a handgun in his pants pocket. We don't know about that one. But anyway, protests outside of the courthouse goes on. In addition to investigation of the shooting, Zappler said the county police are checking the work history of this Roosevelt and a background. Expressed concern that some civilian witnesses to the shooting are not cooperating with the police. Shortly after the shooting, Tuesday evening, the insurance carrier for East Pittsburgh Borough contacted the law firm of Marshall Warner, Duhay Warner, Coleman, and Goggin, to obtain representation for Roosevelt. The attorneys were later was hired by the East Pittsburgh Police Department in mid-May, and had been patrolling the borough since then. The officer was fully sworn in at a meeting on Tuesday night. He had previously worked for the University of Pittsburgh's police department as well as the borough of Oakmont. We don't know Oakmont's borough manager confirmed that Rosemont was a part-time officer from 2011-2013. She couldn't give any details of his employment. The University of Pittsburgh said he worked for the school between the October 2012 and January of 2018. An attorney that represents Anwan's family said the teenager's death is tragic. No doubt a young African shot by an overzealous, poorly trained police officer. And this points back here, some of those facts have been, the facts, while limited, have already revealed this is yet another senseless act of violence where police are sworn to uphold law and order, protected citizens shoots a child indiscriminately and cowardly, and in the back at that. We shouldn't have to add that he had no past criminal record, but in a climate we have to stress the same to all police brutality apologists. And evidently Robner represented Leon Ford, who was shot and paralyzed by a Pittsburgh police officer in 2012. Said Anwan having an empty clip in his pocket, of the fact that there were two guns found outside the car was in don't matter. Well, true indeed. There was a car outside the car, not on the law. Robner said what the officer knew at the time, first of all, and secondly, whether the action was taken to protect his safety. That is something always talked about there. Robner did not object to District Attorney's announcement that he would have no further comment. Normally in these cases, the information that is sketchy can be more damaging than no information at all. We'll put this up on Facebook. A nice smile here of Mr. Rose. And some things about some of his community service. A nice article was written up in the Washington Post. We'll have more on this. ABC has a spin-off of Roseanne without Roseanne Barr. They got rid of her. They'll call it The Connors. The show is centered on the family as they grip with parenthood, dating on expected pregnancies, financial pressure, aging, and in-laws of working-class America. The network said, through all of the fights and the coupon clipping and hand-me-downs, the breakdowns, love, etc., etc. This will have some of the cast members, but no Roseanne Barr will appear there. John Goodman will be there, Sarah Gilbert as her daughter, and her sister Laurie Metcalf. And Goodman, etc., will be there and in this cast. So in other words, what ABC has done basically here is a popular series, made them a lot of money, so they'll get rid of Roseanne and bring the other characters back, slightly change the family, and see what happens. and they ordered 10 episodes of this particular situation. On the Uber driver in Arizona, evidently he was watching, what was he watching? Hulu. Anyway, he was watching a TV show at the time of the accident there. We'll have more on that. Let's do the sports now. Or attempt to do the sports, that is. Anyway, we will do the sports here now. We'll go to the World Cup. Anyway, on Thursday at the World Cup, we had Denmark and Australia. 1-1 was the score there. France and Peru. France 1-0. Argentina and Croatia. Croatia 3-0 there. And today, let's see what we got going here. It will be Friday. We have live right now Brazil and Costa Rica. And later today we'll have Nigeria and Ireland. That'll be at 11 a.m. Eastern Time. And then we'll have Serbia and Switzerland, which will be at 2 a.m. That'll be on the Fox network, unfortunately. Anyway, let's go to baseball scores from last night. The Mariners were in New York, Yankees 4-1. The Red Sox were in the Twin Cities. The Red Sox exploded 9-2. They had 16 hits, no errors, and the Twins 4 hits and no errors. The Mets and Rockies out in Denver. Rockies 6-4. The Orioles and Nationals in D.C. Orioles 4-2. The D-backs and Pirates in Pittsburgh. D-backs 9-3. The Cubs and Reds, it was all Reds in Cincy. Reds 6-2 over the Cubbies. Kyle Hendricks got the loss, one of the better pitchers the Cubs have. The Cardinals and Brewers in Milwaukee. Brewers 11-3. The Blue Jays and Angels in California. Angels 8-5. The Padres and Giants. Padres were shut out. This is in San Francisco. 3-0. Mr. Bumgarner is back, and he was a winner. And rain did in the Athletics. And White Sox on the south side of Chicago. That does it there. And let's see if we can, I don't know if we can get the college World Series up here or not. If not, we'll have to bring them back tomorrow night. Anyway, we don't see them. So this will do it for us. We'll return tomorrow morning on the week that was, as we normally do here at WBRN Radio and on the Boston Red Network. Also this weekend, we have numbers, man. We have an open source report that is basically finished. We need to update it some because we were supposed to have done the report last week. We didn't get around to it. And I'm not certain what we'll do on Sunday, but of course we'll have the Monday morning quarterback on a Monday morning normally. Have a good weekend, everyone. We'll talk to you on Saturday morning.